about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And I'll spend a few minutes to tell you about why do we have to sort of address NAFLD in terms of treatment, how to actually identify patients with NASH that will need treatment, and then talk about current treatment and future treatment of non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Just to remind you, all patients with NAFLD needs to have their cardiovascular risk factors addressed because that's the #1 cause of death in these patients. However, if you want to treat specifically for liver disease, it's patients with NASH, and specifically those patients that have advanced NASH. When you're looking at what kind of outcomes you're looking to improve, of course, all the comprehensive outcome is important, but the two important surrogates are #1, fibrosis improvement, and #2, patient-reported outcome or quality of life. Now, in order to understand and identify patients that have NASH and who are candidates for treatment, you've got a number of modalities that you can look at. First of all, NAFLD can be diagnosed relatively easily with an imaging technology. There are a number of other tests that's listed over here, but if you have ultrasound, CT, or MRI evidence of NAFLD, the accuracy is actually very, very good if you have about 30% or higher fat. So significant fat can be picked up by any of these technologies. NASH, as I mentioned, the gold standard to diagnosis of NASH is the biopsy. You have steatosis, ballooning of hepatocytes, and local inflammation as minimal criteria. And of course, if you see malreading bodies and perissal fibrosis, it's even stronger. Now, it's an imperfect gold standard because it's costly and it has side effects. There are a number of tests that was actually a blood test that were looked at to make the diagnosis of NASH, one of them called CT18. It was not actually that validated, so it has really not been pursued. More importantly, you need to understand the stage of fibrosis, and there are really 3 categories of tests you can use. There's some scoring system. The 3 that I actually listed here are readily available. You can get these formulas in the internet. FIB4, UpRi, and NAFLD fibrosis score. And the cutoffs are right there. They actually are very good in excluding advanced fibrosis and sometimes can be very helpful for suggesting advanced fibrosis. That's really what you're after. You want to make sure that you have fatty liver, probably NASH with advanced fibrosis, so that those patients could be candidates for treatment. In terms of serum-based assays for fibrosis, there are 2. The collagen Pro-C3 has a pretty good area under the curve of about 87%, but it is mostly in the research side. The test that's approved in Europe called ELF, it has 3 components, hyaluronic acid, collagen 3, and TEM. These are basically the components, and there is a formula. You can send it out. This is currently in the United States being considered for FDA approval by Siemens. It is, in my view, a very promising test to identify patients with advanced fibrosis. The cutoff is about 10.5. If you have alpha and higher, you have probably advanced fibrosis. There are a number of imaging technologies that can estimate fibrosis. Now remember, this is not measuring fibrosis. This is measuring stiffness, and stiffness correlates with fibrosis. The one that is commonly used in the United States is transient elastography. And if you have a transient elastography which measures both stiffness as well as fat, if you have a stiffness of more than 9, around 10 or higher, then you have significant fibrosis. There are other technologies, the RFI and shear wave elastography. They are similar in some ways, and you can use them adequately in your practice. The last one is the MR elastography. The MR elastography is probably more accurate. If you can connect it to something called MR-PDFF, it also will give you amount of fat, so you'll have both fat and fibrosis, although it's actually more accurate and may not be more readily available. This is comparing MRE PDFF with FibroScan, both in terms of stiffness, in terms of fat. MRE is better, but when you're looking at what is actually feasible versus which is is accurate, MRE is more accurate, less feasible, FibroScan is point of care. It's actually much easier to do. I have 2 of them, and we do them every day. This is a sequential test that I presented from Stellar 3 and 4 data at the AASLD, looking at almost over 3,000 individuals, and looking at if you do 1, 2, or 3 tests. If you do a FIB4, ELF, and FibroScan, that actually would reduce the number of indeterminates for advanced fibrosis. That means that if you actually do all 3 of them, and you don't have the numbers that correlate with significant amount of fibrosis, you basically will only have about 10 indeterminate cases that may require biopsy, versus only 1 test. If you do just 1 test, you have almost 40% of individuals that will be in this indeterminate sort of category. I'm not going to go through this. There are multiple different algorithms. It's really the indeterminate cases when you combine the clinical presentation of diabetes, age, and then you look at the non-invasive scores, especially the FIB4 and alpha-D fibrosis score, combined with a FibroScan that will give you who's at low risk, who's at high risk for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Let me now just focus in the next 10 minutes on treatment. Remember, the treatment of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease must have a multi-pronged approach, must have a public health sort of approach to deal with obesity and type 2 diabetes. But those who actually are going to be treatment candidates for medication or regimen are especially those patients with NASH-related fibrosis, and there are a number of therapeutic targets to improve actually metabolic abnormality, insulin sensitivity, inflammation, and fibrosis. So let's actually look at some of the data in terms of weight loss. This is a great study from Spain looking at weight loss and multiple biopsies. This is weight loss with diet and exercise. And the bottom line of this study is that you can actually improve steatosis if you lose about 5% weight. But in order to improve fibrosis, you have to actually lose more than 10%. The problem, of course, is that the 10% weight loss happens in about 10% of patients. So it's effective if you can achieve it, but it is hard to achieve. The other problem here is that when you look at concurrent collaboration over the years of patients who actually lose weight, only 16% over the years, over 5 years, maintain the weight loss. Bariatric surgery, you've heard a lot about that. That is actually quite effective. I'm not going to show you the data here, but I have a slide I'll show you a bit later. Now, in terms of the medical weight loss, these are the diet. Again, in general, if you can, it's all through reducing the caloric intake and gaining the weight loss. Bariatric surgery, just pay attention to the top. That's probably the best longitudinal study. When you see patients with bariatric surgery, and you see that all the yellow and red change into green, that means that steatosis is actually improving, fibrosis is improving in the first year, and you do a biopsy in 5 years, it is maintained. So most of the gains happen in the first year of the bariatric surgery. And you can see actually complete resolution of NASH and actually complete improvement of fibrosis in a lot of these patients. Bariatric endoscopy is big in different parts of the world, not a lot of data, but at least there is one that was presented at last DDW suggesting that with non-invasive tests, that if you lose the weight, you can have improvement of fatty liver as well. So currently there are no treatment. Vitamin E and pioglitazone has been suggested by the AASLD guideline. I'm the second author for that guideline. It's not FDA approved, but it's actually something we use. There are other drugs that are available, but they're not currently routinely recommended. There's a list of other drugs that have been used and have all failed to show efficacy. Now, vitamin E, there are a number of studies. The one that is probably most important is the PIVOT study from the NIH, and that suggested that compared to placebo, 800 international units per day of vitamin E was effective, more effective than placebo. I don't start with 800, I start at 400. If that liver enzyme normalizes after 3 months, that's all I use. So, but the AASLD guidance document suggests that you need to discuss risks benefits before you actually talk about this, because there are some potential risks. Pioglitazone, again, there are a number of sort of the different studies that have been done. This was the proper study done by Ken Cousy, was published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, suggesting that in the pre-diabetic and diabetic patients with NASH, if you use pioglitazone, there is improvement of not only NASH but also fibrosis, and this was also proven in the meta-analysis. Again, pioglitazone is an option for some patients, but risks and benefits need to be discussed with patients. Lipid-lowering agents by themselves do not have an impact on fatty liver, but they are safe and they should be used to treat dyslipidemia. And there's plenty of data to support this, and this is the AACD guidance documents. So what are some of the new drugs? These are some of the targets you saw. So you saw everything in terms of dysbiosis to going after macrophages to fibrosis to oxidative stress. And there are tons and tons of drugs. And the last count I had on the FDA website, there are almost 90 or 100 different regimens that are being used. I'm just going to talk to you about the phase 3 clinical trials. These are the 4 that are currently ongoing, and some of them already have preliminary data out there. The first one is the GenFit protocol, study of lafebrinar, and this is the phase 2 study that suggested there was some improvement of steatohepatitis. Now, this has actually gone into a phase 3 clinical trial that's ongoing, and it's not resulted yet, and it's enrolling thousands of patients, and I think by next year we should have some data. Now, Centaur is the allergen protocol, and again, initially there was some improvement of fibrosis. Now, this is theoretically an anti-inflammatory drug, but fibrosis improved, and this led to, and it was maintained after the second biopsy, and this is now being looked at Aurora, which is a study that probably will provide data next year. The 2 drugs that are very exciting, one is obeticholic acid, and the initial data came from the NIH, the Flint study. This study was actually terminated early because there was an efficacy in terms of steatohepatitis and fibrosis. And it went on to Regenerate, which has screened almost 3,000 patients. I'm the chair of the steering committee for this study, and as you may have heard, the press release came out last week or so that there was efficacy in terms of fibrosis. It met the fibrosis primary endpoint, and there was some issues with pruritus, and that has to be discussed. And this data will be presented at the EASL meeting in Vienna. Selonsertib is an ASK1 inhibitor by Gilead Sciences, and a phase 2 clinical trial. It suggested that it does improve a number of histologic parameters, and this is being actually looked at in 2 different studies, Stellar 3 and Stellar 4. The Stellar 4 study was actually for patients with cirrhosis, and the outcome was an improvement by 1 stage of fibrosis without worsening steatohepatitis. Stellar 3 is for patients with stage 3 fibrosis, and the global PI for Stellar 3. Stellar 4, of course, Gilead had a press release a couple of weeks suggesting that in cirrhotics it was not effective in terms of fibrosis. I have to say that it's very difficult to treat cirrhotics and NASH, because by the time you're in cirrhosis, you may not have the sort of mechanism to actually improve the pathways. These are some of the other drugs. I'm not gonna go into any of these, but these are all being tested in phase 2 or maybe some of them phase 3 clinical trials. One drug I will mention is the GLP-1 agonist. This is the liraglutide, and when you look at the data, almost 83% of patients had more than 5% weight loss. Now remember, this is the drug that also has cardioprotection. This is a drug that has cardioprotection, and even in Felnusum had this paper presented a couple of years ago showing that in NASH there is actually improvement. Semaglutide is of course the new cut in the block, and the randomized clinical trial in improvement of weight was very, very promising. And there's also a poster that was presented at AASLD suggesting improvement of ALT, but most of that was related to weight loss. So the next generation of, let me just go back, I guess, Anyway, the next, that slide that I was not able to show you was the combination. There are a number of combination of drugs that are actually being tested, and in my view, since this disease has multiple different pathways, it will be the combination that will actually will work. So, and how do we actually treat non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in the future? I've listed them all. Physical activity can improve. Dietary change, that question came up. Is it better to have one type of diet versus another? It's really, there's not a lot of data. They may improve fat, but not been shown to actually improve fibrosis. Weight reduction, I mentioned, and then how long to treat is going to be another issue. My own belief is that this is a disease of metabolic abnormality like diabetes. You cannot treat this for 6 months or a year. You're going to have to treat this for a long period of time. So it's going to be induction for 1 year, on my word, with multiple drugs, and then a maintenance for a long time.
1 minute.
And this is the final slide. In order to actually treat this disease, you have to have a multi-disciplinary team that includes not only your hepatologist, but also your bariatric surgeon, your endocrinologist, your nutritionist, and everyone else. So, to summarize, it is important to treat all patients with NAFLD because of their cardiovascular risk, but those who actually require treatment from liver standpoint are those with NASH and NASH with fibrosis. And although liver biopsy is the current standard, gold standard for diagnosing NASH, there are a number of other tests that are being developed. So as we develop new drugs, we have to have parallel public health sort of approach. Current standard treatment for NASH is quite limited, but there are a large number of clinical trials that are being actually used in the future. And I'm going to stop here, and thanks again for your